How to put it, it should be a red letter day for the Development Management Institute for more reasons than one. We not only have in our midst this afternoon a very eminent academic, ladies and gentlemen, but somebody who has probably focused his entire research effort on what constitutes the mission of DMI. We talk about empowering grassroots, we talk about combating poverty, we talk about pushing the frontiers of development, and we feel we can do all this with management. Probably our belief is well founded to an extent, but sometimes a lot of management academics do tell you that management very often scratches the surface. But if you have to get to the very bottom of the problems, you need to do a lot more than that. You need to do deeper research. And that's exactly what Dr. Banerjee has been doing all his career. And it would be a crime on my part to stand any longer between you and him. But before I hand over the floor to him to take us through this presentation of his on the science of fighting poverty, I would request my colleague Professor Suryabhushan to give a brief academic introduction so that you will realize that what little curtain have unfurled on Professor Banerjee's academic career was not adequately founded. Professor Suryabhushan for the introduction.
Thank you, sir. In fact, it cannot be brief if you look at the way the range he has touched upon, particularly when it comes to the economic theory and public policy making. So I remember in fact, since I also belong to the same center from where he did his master's, so we used to have a lot of anecdotes regarding him. He was always considered as a rock star among us. So, so it is a privilege for us to have with you in Patna. So, in fact, he did his graduation from Presidency College, and he's coming from the family of professors. So his mother was professor, his father was also professor. His father was renowned economist. In fact, people used to call him Dada Banerjee. In fact, I can offline discuss about him also sometimes. So, and then he come to JNU for his masters, and then he went to Harvard for his PhD. His supervisor was another Nobel laureate in masking. I guess he got Nobel Prize in 2007, sir. And then he moved to M.I.T. And if you look at his work, he started with, I think, the herd behavior and the envy and those kind of very niche field in that time. Particularly the early 90s, people were talking about a different world, and he suddenly changed the course of the game to the micro part of the development economics. And the poor economics, in fact, the result of that intensive research which he has done over the period, in fact, thanks to his one of his doctoral students, that is another Mr. Daflo, to whom he has worked on RCT. Particularly now, today we are going to, he is going to reflect on the science of poverty. I would rather interested to the technology part, because that is what I believe is the technology which is missing. If you want to change the mankind or change the human life, we need to have a technology. Science is always there. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that excessively kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. So, what I want to talk to you about today is the kind of work we do in the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab. It's an organization we set up now, I guess, 15 years ago, and with the idea that one reason why we are not effective in fighting poverty is that we actually sort of make judgments which may not be very reliable. So we don't often use evidence to inform our judgments. And JPAL's mission from the beginning was to ensure that policy is driven by evidence and research is translated into action. So we do three things in this process. I think I say this because as you'll see that as I go through this connections with all the, one thing we do we do what are called randomized evaluations. So randomized evaluations are the kind of the social science equivalent of medical trials. So if you think about how people test a medicine, they basically randomly choose one group of people to get a particular medicine and another group not get it, and then they compare them. And the reason they do that is that they want to be able to say that the two groups, that one group that got the medicine, the one that didn't, was identical to start with. And the way you make sure they're identical is by choosing them by lottery rather than choosing them based on some particular characteristic. So that's sort of how all medical trials happen. And in some ways, what we do is the equivalent of that in social sciences. So one of the things that JPAL has sort of made, I think, much easier and much more common is the use of these randomized controlled trials, or what people call RCTs, to evaluate social programs. And we have now 900 of them that we have done all over the world in 80 countries. So it's now it constitutes a really quite substantial body of knowledge. I didn't do almost any of them, so it's not taking credit for me. It's an organization. It's an organization of a whole 200 odd professors, and so they have together done this, but it's still a kind of a useful body of knowledge, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we've learned there. The second thing we do is we kind of try to spread, this is what I'm doing now, spread the doctrine. We try to get people to understand the value of doing these things, and how to do it, and how to make yourself more effective as a social scientist in interpreting evidence. And the third thing we do is we work with governments, and that's the context in which I'm here today. We work, for example, with the government of Bihar, Ministry of Rural Development, on trying to implement a particular program. I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. So, continue. So, I think one of the things that inspired us was this rather, maybe it should be obvious, but I mean, we were rather surprised by how little evidence or even serious attention to detail went into decisions. So I often use this example of a publication of the World Bank, where it said there was a program that put computers in villages in India, in Madhya Pradesh actually, and there was no power in those villages, so the computers didn't do anything, and most of them shut down as a result. After that, it says, following the success of the program. So in other words, the program was a complete disaster. It was known to be a disaster, but they didn't even notice that. They just went out to say this was a success. So, and I think that may be extreme, but I think in general, there is a sense in which people have been quite casual about the standards of evidence, and I think what happens as a result is people just go based on their intuition, what they read in some book somewhere, what their ideology tells them, and the result is often what you'd expect, which is that there's no particular reason they would work and they don't work. And I'll give you examples of that as well. So I think there are two separate problems here. One, I think, is that it's very hard to have good intuitions, especially since we don't know our own ideologies. So one of the things that I think is very common, I'll tell you a little bit about this in a bit, is we should never pay people to do what they should do on their own. This is a general principle, often articulated in the development sector. As I'll point out, not based on anything in particular, other than a certain ideological view of the world. But I think equally, so some of it's ideology, but also it's hard. At some level, it's easy to say improving education is difficult without more resources. It's hard to pinpoint to the exact resource that's the most valuable. If you had only 1 lakh rupees and you had to spend it on some resource, which one? That's the question you, as a policymaker, it's easy to say, yes, give me more resources and things will be better. It's hard to say, if you give me a fixed amount of resources, how I would spend it. And those questions, there isn't really a science unless you sort of do these RCTs or other similar studies of answering that question. So in some ways, what we're going to try to do is answer questions like that, questions that are exactly about details, about, is it the case that textbooks are useful, or should we spend the money on charts, or should we pay teachers more? This I already told you. I'll skip. This is the idea of a randomized controlled trial. So I'm going to. That's a kind of a map of what we do in JPAL. Over 900 evaluations in 71 countries all over the world. India is one of the. If you look at that map, one country which has lots and lots and lots of dots is India. The dots are colored differently, not because we want to make it pretty, though it does make it pretty, but because they represent different domains where we work. We work in agriculture, in crime and violence, education, finance, health, environment, labor market. So they're very different, governance, all these different areas. So, and the dots represent those different areas. So what I will do now is I'm going to go through a series of examples where I feel that we learn something by not being guided by received wisdom. So received wisdom number 1 is giving away things is throwing away money. Let me give you an example of what. So the question we were dealing with is in Rajasthan is how to immunize. This is in Udaipur district, which is at that time full immunization rates, which is getting 5 different shots, was 1%. So this is a extraordinarily low number in this very beautiful place, and I think there was a sense in which the government system up to a point clearly worked, meaning we could see that it was free, getting immunized was free. It's free everywhere in India. In fact, it was the government was made sure that the supply chain worked. So if you wanted to get your child immunized, the medicine was available, but somehow the child didn't get immunized. That one argument people made why they didn't get immunized is this is a government health sub-center, and if you can, and the key point is that the door is locked and is often locked. In fact, we basically found that it was only open 43% of the time. So most of the time it was locked. So one view of why people didn't get immunized was it was impossible to get immunized. That's one theory. That's the theory you get from the NGOs. From the government, there was a very different theory. The government's view was it's impossible to immunize these people. They're backward people. You cannot immunize them because they're backward people and they don't want to get immunized. And they tell you a long story about how they go to some what in Rajasthan is called a bhopa, or you might call it ojha here or something. Traditional healer, so they don't believe in immunization. So there was this, they would have this nice conversation, and then nothing, of course, will be done because you have two views. And so we came and said, look, let's just see what we find. So the way we organized was there were we randomly chose 3 groups of villages. Some villages were going to have camps. The camps were run by an NGO quite well established, very well established NGO in that area. And the idea was that we'll make sure that unlike the government health center, if you want to get immunized, the immunization was available to you. You can get immunized. That was guaranteed basically, and it happened 90-something% of the time. There was a camp with somebody. The government actually provided the medicines free, and they worked quite closely with Seva Mandir, which is an NGO, and so it worked very well. It was available. Second thing we did was, well, we said maybe in addition to camps, we'll offer a small amount of a small gift. Small gift was every time you immunize your child, you get a kilo of dal. And this is a long time ago, so dal wasn't quite as expensive, so we could actually afford it. So those are the red villages. And the basic reason why we designed it this way was, if you believe that it's because people can't find the nurse to immunize the child and they don't get immunized, then providing the camp should just solve the problem. If you believed, on the other hand, that people don't want to get immunized because of, then the camps are not going to do anything, but probably incentives won't do anything either, because incentives are, after all, if you have a deep belief that this is a bad thing to do and God will punish you for doing it, then of course why would you end up in the camp? And here is basically the randomization of these places worked very well. You can see that the immunization rates in the baseline in the three groups of villages were statistically identical, 0%, 1% and 2%. So there was no difference between them. Gave them the extra dal, it went up to 38%. So that's a 6.5 times increase in the immunization rate you get from having basically the combination of the camps and the dal. And what this says is that yes, indeed, it's a problem for people to get immunized because it went from 6% to 17%, but there was no resistance to it. They were perfectly willing to get immunized. I'm going to skip all those. Here's a fact that then comes out. If you actually look at the cost per immunized child, it's much cheaper if you give away the money than if you don't. Why? Because essentially, what's the cost of getting immunizing? The main cost of immunizing, you have to hire somebody to sit there, and if nobody shows up, that person is completely wasted. So the way you cut costs is by having volume. The way you have volume is by having the dal. And the dal essentially drew in a lot of people, and as a result, per child immunized, the cost was about half when you gave away money, then including the cost of the dal, by the way. This is not the total cost, including the cost of the dal, was half when you gave away the dal than when you didn't. So that's I think a lesson in sort of, you don't know, and ideology is not helpful here. I'm going to skip all that. Second, it is a similar, I think, piece of received wisdom, that if you don't pay for something, you don't value it. And this is a very, very, this particular view had a lot of influence. In particular, the debates that this was going on was maybe 2004, 5. There was a very large company called PSI, Population Services International, which is basically a US government contractor. And they were very strongly for the view that you cannot give away medicines or things like that, because if you gave them away, people won't value them. And they were insistent that this was clearly, so therefore you should charge money for everything. Even a small amount of money, we should always charge money. So this was the particular view that, and this was the particular issue we were dealing with in this because in East Africa it's malaria, and this was a while ago. These numbers have now been basically halved. I'll tell you why in a minute. About nearly 1 million died every year, most of them under 5. This is the falciparum malaria, which sort of what we call cerebral malaria in India. So that's the common form of malaria. And so, first question: there was a solution that was known. The solution was to put kids under 5 under a bed net, which is insecticides treated. So, and the insecticide treatment lasts for about 5 years. So there is a technology for basically saturating the net with insecticide so that the mosquitoes stay away. And this you can do for some relatively small amount of money. Like, I think the market price of these things was like $6 or something. So, not very expensive technology, and it was known that would keep the mosquitoes away. The question was, should you give them away or not? And the very strong view of PSI, which was the US government contractor there, was that you shouldn't give them away. And the story was that if you give them away, they'll just use it for fishing. See the picture? Yeah, I'm sure some nets were used for fishing. This is the opposite, which is you give them out free. And so the first question was, do you use it if you get it free? And the second question was, if I give it to you free, will you stop buying it in the future? So maybe yes, you use it, but then you get used to getting things free, so you say, I don't want to pay for it. So the basic design of the experiment was that people were given, mothers who had come to the hospital were given a coupon, and the coupon said what price you can buy it at. So some people got 0, some people got 65, equivalent to 65 cents, $1, 1.60, 2, 3. So this is the range of prices. And then what they did was and you can see that the purchase goes down very sharply. By the time you have $3 is about 50% of the market price of the net. At 50%, only 20% buy it. So that's point number one. Prices discourage people from buying. Not maybe surprising. Second, they went at night and checked whether the kids were sleeping under the bed net, and use is completely uncorrelated with the price. Use is flat. It doesn't matter what price you buy it at, you use it at the same rate. It's completely uncorrelated with the price, so it doesn't matter which price you buy at. As a result, and the third fact was that if you look at the people who got free, or they are, if anything, more likely to buy it again than the people who didn't get it for free. Because the people who got it for free, for them, they used the nets much more because more of them bought it. Those who got the coupon for free were much more likely to use it because they're much more likely to have bought it. And if you buy it, you get used to the fact that yes, it's a nice thing to have. So they were much more likely to use it. So as a result, many lives were saved. And PSI at some point realized that the evidence was, they first fought the evidence, then decided that the evidence was too overwhelming, and they decided that from now on, bed nets will be given away free. And if you look at what's happened as a result of giving away these bed nets free, is that the malaria death rates have fallen by 50% over the last 10 years. So that's, continuing, particularly, so another thing we learned from doing the experiments is we spent many years trying to figure out how to get children to learn. And I think from that work, and we did, I'm going to say, 3 RCTs in Bihar in this period, and several in UP, Uttarakhand, Gujarat, Maharashtra, etc. So this is many studies put together, and the sum total of those studies is that children don't learn, and in other countries as well, not because there's not enough teachers, not because the teachers are not trained, not because the teachers are underpaid. In fact, Indian teachers are paid extremely well. By global standards, our teachers are among the best paid. Relative to per capita GDP, our teachers are globally among the best paid teachers. So, presumably, if we paid teachers, 1 crore a month, we would get a lot better teachers, but it's not what the government can afford. I think a reasonable way to think about it is relative to other bureaucrats or relative to other employees, how well are they paid? They're paid extremely well. So none of these, one thing we learned is that this and many other things that we tried didn't improve teaching. What improved teaching was something very simple, which is teaching the children what they need to learn. So the challenge comes from the fact that, I don't know if you know, there is this survey that gets published every year called ASAR, and in ASAR you find every year that roughly 50% of children in class 5 can do class 2 mathematics. Class 2 mathematics means divide 67 by 9. Roughly, I would say 50% has been going down for many years, so it's gone, actually used to be higher, has gone down, so it's a little bit less than 50% now, but let's say 50%. So this, and for reading it's a little higher, but not much. Now, so on the other hand, and in fact, there's let me say one more. If you look at private schools, there is a study which in Andhra Pradesh which gave families vouchers so that they could go to the private schools for free. And the effect of that is, I would say, essentially zero. There's no effect. So private schools is just as bad as government schools. Well, you see a difference between private schools and government schools, but that's mostly selection. Mostly the people who send their children to private schools they're richer, they're more interested in education, etc. So you see a difference. But you take the same child and you move him to, you give them parents a coupon to take your child to a private school for free, that has no effect on their test scores. So no real. So it's not because the schools are government that they're not learning. It's because of something else. What is it? So we spend lots of time trying to figure this out. This particular program, this is in Jaunpur in UP, local high school educated volunteers who are not paid anything carried out an evening learning camps for 2 months. These volunteers were trained for 3 days. Roughly every teacher in India gets 1 month of training every year. So there is 3 days of training for their life. If you look at the effect, the gains were equivalent of going from not being able to recognize numbers to being able to do subtraction. So very large gains. In the course of 2 months. So this was done for 2 months. Within 2 months, somebody who has no professional training can improve. And we have 8 other studies which find the same thing. So it's not one study, 8 studies which find exactly the same thing, which is you don't need somebody with 3 degrees. You just need somebody who's willing to do what is necessary. And what it matters is what is necessary. So what is necessary is to recognize that most children are not necessarily at grade level when you teach. So teachers teach the curriculum. In fact, under the Right to Education Act, they are required to teach the curriculum. However, if you go to most classes, most children in class 3 are at class 1 level. If you are class 1 level and I teach you the class 3 curriculum, you learn nothing. Because the class 3 curriculum requires that you know class 1 and class 2. You are in class 1 level, so you learn nothing. And then likewise at class 4 you learn nothing, and in class 5 at some point you drop out. And that's the established pattern for children. You can see there's a nice set of studies by Karthik Muralidharan, who's one of our JPAO affiliates, who looks at the entire time path of a child. So, what happens? If a child misses out in getting basic skills in class 1 and 2, he doesn't progress at all. He essentially stays flat. So, and that's exactly what you expect in a world where there's no allowance for catch up. So if you just do catch up, people catch up. Now the interesting question to us is, why is it that why does this happen? Well, it happens because the entire curriculum is designed to make it happen. The curriculum is designed for the children of the elite. It's a product of a previous kind of history of education, which education was for the elites. The British set up the education system to recruit some small numbers of the members of the elite to be their assistants, and that's what the education system is designed for. So this is no surprise here, but we have continued exactly the model, and as a result we don't teach. So in Bihar we did one study, which was we used for 1 month school teachers where in the summer were given the job of just teaching children what they need to learn, not the curriculum. You get gains which are almost as big as their entire learning in a year. Actually, bigger than their entire learning in a year. In 1 month, when the teachers, so these are the same teachers who teach school and whose children don't learn anything. But when you give them the job that this is what you're supposed to do, they can do it. It's not because the entire system is designed to make this happen. It's not because teachers are lazy. They are lazy sometimes, but I think the main point is that it's because the intention of the system is to cater to an elite and to forget about all other children. And that's why it happens. One last example of the kind of work we do. And this is about a program that I'll tell you a little bit more about, which we're working on in Bihar. So I think the stereotype is very much that you should not give people money, because if you give them money, they're going to stop working and they're going to spend their money on whatever, alcohol or tobacco or something else. They're going to become lazy and they're going to. So as a result, there's been a long tradition of people resisting giveaways. So this is a program that BRAC, which is a very large NGO in Bangladesh. It's a livelihoods program where the poorest households are provided with a sequence of services. They get, at the beginning, they get an asset, a free asset, typically of their choosing, but they often choose cattle or chicken or something. After they do that, they for a short period of time, because a cow doesn't give milk the day you buy the cow, so you need to give them something to keep them, to feed the cow and all that. and so they get a stipend. This stipend in the particular program in India was 90 rupees a week for 6 months. After that, the stipend stops. Somebody comes to visit them and collect savings from them, and they get a lot of encouragement. Somebody comes and says, आप भी कर सकते हैं. They keep encouraging these people. So there's all of these ingredients in it. Skip this. A lot of focus on women for the very good reason that there's a lot of women get married very young and they don't have any particular skills. So it's not when they face, for example, some adversity. A lot of the women we were working with were women who had, their husband had abandoned them, or their husband had died, or their husband had some disease, and at that point they have no skills. So they were living by begging, because that's the only thing that requires no skills. So we studied this program, and first variants of this programs where people were given assets or money in many countries. This is a small part of that actually. And the robust fact is that if you give people money, they don't become lazy. If anything, some of the programs find that the opposite. If anything, you find the opposite, which is that if you give people money, especially very poor people, they tend to work harder because actually they are very depressed often, and depressed people don't work. So when you give them money, these are from randomized controlled trials, and you can see that in all the countries there's zero difference, or if anything the difference is positive. So giving money doesn't make people lazy. Maybe giving enough money would make them lazy, but this is a small amount of money or an asset. What happens to consumption is consumption goes up for everybody. This is at year 2, which is roughly 18 months after the program started. This is year 3, which is where we don't have data from less countries, and consumption goes up in all but one country. And after 5.5 years, you can see that they're spending 38% more time working, consuming 46% more. Their food security is 64% more. Food security means, do they say they missed a meal? So the fraction of people who say they never missed a meal goes up by 64%, and so on. And now we have 10 years later, after they got the asset, we have data. And again, they continue to be richer than the control group. So it's a very kind of robust finding that in all these countries, same program, same effect, which is that people get richer when you give them, and they stay richer long after the original cow has been sold, or whatever, the original goats have been eaten, or whatever other things have happened. All of that's gone, and they still stay richer. There is no evidence that this leads them to spend a lot of money on alcohol or tobacco. This is the effect on spending on temptation goods, which are things like alcohol, tobacco, etc. And 9 of them have negative and significant effects, meaning it went down. When you give 17 have no negative and zero insignificant effects. 4 had positive and insignificant effects. And 1 had a positive and significant effect. So overall, very strongly evidence that people, and this is consistent with the view that people who are extremely poor are often depressed, and depressed people are more likely to abuse substances. In my last few minutes, let me talk about, can the ultra poor program be scaled up by governments? So we're working with 3 different governments. In Rajasthan, in Jhalawar, in Jharkhand, in Dumka and Paschim Singhbhum, and then this is in Bihar, and let me. Basic idea is we have this evidence I showed you, so we're going to governments and we are discussing is there interest in governments to get involved in running this program. So this is a program that has been run so far only by NGOs. Question is, does the government want to run it? And there's of course many reasons why that might be different. In particular, government has its own staff which has their own obligations, and it has maybe the control structure is more bureaucratic, etc. So there are quite good reasons why you might think that yes, an NGO can do this, but the government cannot. So right now in Bihar we are beginning a study where right at the beginning what we are doing is we are the way the program starts is by identifying potential beneficiaries and then randomizing among them. So that's a process that's been done. Now they are going to get the assets and we're going to follow them to see what happens, and then if the program works, the Bihar government is committed to scaling it up to 100,000 households. So the study that's going on is in two blocks, Supi and Barsoi, with 2,000 households, and then based on what we learn, there is the idea that this will become one of the flagship programs of the government. We're going to study these households for 24 months. So because I mean, once you give people an asset right at the beginning, they are going to obviously be better off. But the question is, and I think there'll be a lot of policy attention at the beginning, so there will be a lot of, lot of interest, and the local block officials will be excited. But over time, sustainability is a different question, and so what we're really interested in is it going to be sustained up to 24 months. So that's what's happening right now, and we are very excited about the potential for, I think, for something like this becoming a real tool for governments, something that goes from being an idea that NGOs can implement to something that could be one major tool for governments. And this is right now where we are. Skip this. This is sort of too much detail. So let me finish by saying that I think what I try to persuade you is the fight against poverty is kind of like the fight against cancer. There are many individual problems. It's not one problem. You're not solving one problem. Poverty is not one problem. It's 1,000 different problems. It's the particular way the school teaches. It's the particular way the immunization is delivered. People. The reason why, going back to the immunization example I gave you, I think now we understand quite well why that happens. Well, the reason why it happens is that immunization is actually quite difficult. It requires parents to remember over a period of 2 years that, this is now month 18 and I have to take my child back and get them immunized. And now this is month 21 and I have to take this child back and get immunized. So there is some, and this is when you have lots of other distractions in your life, when you have, you're poor and you have lots of other problems, it's hard to imagine people sort of having a very strict calendar that they can stick to. So the expectation that you stick to a clear schedule and you follow through with it is a demanding one. And we kind of see that because if you look at the data, even in Rajasthan, even at this time when almost nobody was fully immunized, the first and second shot most children had. The third shot you see a fall off, the fourth injection almost nobody gets, and so on. And that's why the fifth one is 0. And so it's the fall off. So it's not that parents were not trying, but it's just difficult. Often what happens is the mothers also get pregnant again, and then there is a new child or a new distraction in the household, and so the whole thing is then focus shifts to that other child, and so it's hard to keep it going. So I think I say that because I want to emphasize that that's an example of a sense in which we need to think of the problem. This is one specific problem of poverty, which is you're poor, you're often under pressure, you don't often feel many compulsions driving you, and it's very hard to keep track of some process that takes two years to go through. So the reason why the dal was working, the dal was reminding them, well, let me go and get the dal, and therefore I can just, it's a pleasant reminder. We've now tried to implement the same thing using cell phones and cell phone payments in Haryana, and again we get positive results. So when people get reminded and there's something to remember, it makes it memorable, then you see positive impact. So I think I understand. That's an example of the sense in which the problem of poverty comes through many dimensions. It's not just a matter of thinking of it as poor people have less money. It's also that they are in a particular psychological state, they are under particular forms of pressure, they are particularly, they may not have particular forms of information, the state might treat them differently, the expectation of the education system is that, every child goes home and does homework and parents help them. Most of those parents are not actually literate, or they are semi-literate, so it's very hard for them. So all of these are different aspects of poverty, and each of them manifests in a different set of problems. So it's not one problem, and in that sense it's like cancer. Cancer is really not one problem. It's a 10 different problems, and you have to fight each of them separately. And there are many people who have magic solutions to this problem. But I think precisely because it's not one problem, no magic solution will work. Because maybe if there's one problem, you could solve it. But if you have 15 different problems, you're never going to solve it by one bullet. And the truth is often, it's complicated. It doesn't necessarily give itself to, an quick solution or a solution that makes us all feel good. Sometimes it's just difficult. And so I think we're reluctant to face up to solutions which require, say that, this is not going to solve today, it's going to solve tomorrow, it's going to take a long time, a lot of effort. That kind of solution is not politically popular. We want to have, I'm going to come make a grand gesture, cut a ribbon, and all problems will be solved. And this is very common in all countries. India is not particularly special in this, but we have a lot of these. On the other hand, I feel that one thing we've learned is slow progress, but quite, I think, sure progress is being made. And I think if we do the homework, if we work hard to figure out the solution, we will solve the problem. We can win this battle. Stop there.
Any observations you might like to make? I would request each member of the audience to introduce themselves. Be as brief as possible with your questions.
from your perspective, what do you think? What is the main problem?
I think I tried to say I don't believe in this idea of men. Poor household has the same problem. I think that's precisely why our solutions often fail. Is we forget that being poor doesn't necessarily mean homogeneous. We don't provide the right solutions.
So, this is question of even how it takes doesn't usually it works spending money. But is there any research which shows that there is a little bit more line to what extent we can spend to get what type of result we would be? So, is there anything, sir? Can you throw some light on it?
Alas, no. I mean, I think the reason is mostly people don't want to give away any money, so the amount they give away are so small. You have in mind somebody giving away lots of money and seeing if that has potentially negative effect. I've never seen anyone give away a lot of money. So states tend to give away very small amounts of money, maybe 10,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees, but nobody gives away 5 lakhs. So we don't know the answer to that question. It's an interesting question. I just don't think anybody's tried it.
So can I have? So probably the way we have learned something, we may be wrong in this, and I may be wrong. Please forgive me. But probably the first thing, all the development interventions this country started with, it was more or less the beneficiary oriented, and then it was said that we spend that much of money on per beneficiary, and if you calculate that amount of money, probably it comes up with a huge money. I don't know whether it is there or not, but if you say per beneficiary money is spent, there's a huge. So I think a small example. Working in a small district was down districts, and conducted a research, and then we found that there was a lot of problems, social problem conversions, and all of this is what's going there. When I found that, asked the district magistrate that how much money have been spent on the development, and I counted all the projects which the district has got and done for them. If you distribute the money among the eligible voters of district, so everybody would have been reached by the 5 lakhs or something like that. But so nothing happened. The problem continues. That's why.
Let me push back a little. I think a district in India has something of the order of 2 crore people. 2 crore people times 5 lakhs will be roughly our GDP. So I don't think that's what, I think that number is exaggerated by a factor of 100. So I'm going to resist that number. I just don't believe that number. It's not in this. Now, I think what is true, and I think where you are entirely right, is that I think there are tons and tons of programs. And if you just look at the number of programs for which the government of India has now created MIS systems, there are 434 separate anti-poverty programs. Many of these programs do nothing. They were never really ever conceived of as being effective. It was just somebody's idea. In the budget, every group has to be given a program. Even if those programs are not seriously implemented or nobody takes them seriously, Mr. Jaitley gives everybody a small gift. If you are a scheduled tribe, you get this gift. If you are women, you get this other. Widows get that other gift. There's a gift for everybody. And most of those programs are not implemented with any degree of seriousness. So I think you're right in saying that there's lots of money that gets assigned to this program, maybe even spent, but often not spent, which are wasted. But I think that's almost by design. I think that, and part of the reason is that we don't hold people to the standard of saying, why are you throwing this money away? What justification do you have for saying that this program is going to help anybody? For example, under the Ayushman Bharat Yojana, I calculated how much money was that. They're going to fix up 150,000, 1.5 lakh health centers. I calculated how much money they are assigning per health center. Maybe 5,000 rupees per health center. Nothing's going to happen. 5,000 rupees, you can maybe paint one room inside that health center. So it's just
I think there is a sense in which, that money is going to be wasted because nobody has ever thought of how to use that money. What money is needed to upgrade a health center. Nobody thought about it. It's just laga diya. So therefore there is no, by design it's meant to fail. So part of what we're trying to say is that you have to first have reason to think it's going to work, and that's why we generate the evidence. So most of these schemes are never meant to work. So I don't think that's not the same thing as saying whether you should give away money or not. I totally agree with you that you should not give away money without a purpose, and that's what I see. Most of these schemes are entirely, like that, the Ayushman Bharat, that's just a gesture. I mean, that particular piece of it, maybe the insurance will work. I'm skeptical. Maybe it will work. But certainly the upgrading the health centers piece of it, there's no money for it. If you don't budget for it, you cannot achieve anything for sure.
Hello. Yeah.
You can come closer.
One observation and a quick question. I've followed the work of JPAL and the kind of work JPAL has done in terms of informing policy based on evidence and research. But we also find that a lot of government policy, once made or even revised, it gets entangled in terms of implementation. So, is there a scope for research or improving the ways the government policy are implemented? What I want to indicate is, the human aspects or the organizational aspects. Do you think that research can also help bring out, those obstacles there?
I think that's a mostly false dichotomy. I think all programs are part implementation, part concept. And we work with, I personally work with maybe 8 or 9 state governments of India by now, and every program that has been implemented with the government is partly solving implementation problems. We don't, at least as JPAL, we don't do works in some laboratory where we bring in artificial people and work with them. We work with real programs, and real programs are always partly implementation. I think that there's no distinction of any use between programs where programs and implementation. I think programs are whatever Ministry of Health, and then they hand it down with zero idea of implementation. In fact, Ayushman Bharat is a classic example of, there is no idea of how the 5,000 different conditions that will have to be priced out in different contexts will be priced. Who's going to do it? In the US, there is, for Obamacare, which is a much smaller program, there are, I think, 10,000 odd people whose job is to price each piece. If you have this kind of cough, what is the amount to be paid? That job is done by professionals. You look at the description of Ayushman Bharat, nobody has yet noticed that there is no staff that is populating that. I think it's a huge problem that implementation is not taken seriously. But I don't think that's, for us, I don't think we ever pretend that program is anything without the implementation.
First, sir, internationally we have organizations like IMF forming policies for developing countries. Then in India also we have M.I.T that is formulating policies against poverty. Then also in state, and we don't find any convergence between the three. I mean, the recommendations of IMF proved very fatal for countries like Argentina. We saw Argentinian crisis, then Brazilian crisis. So, I mean, why there is no convergence, and what is it that is restricting it? I mean, unless there is a proper institutional framework, both internationally as well as nationally, we can't win this battle of poverty alone by.
I mean, I don't disagree. I guess I think the IMF is a particular, very specific kind of political object in the world. It has a particular political purpose, and so I don't labor under the illusion that it is designed to solve poverty. I think poverty is second order for the IMF. The IMF is interested in debt being repaid, and it makes sure that debt is repaid. That is its job. And then if it needs, government needs debt, they can provide debt. It's about whatever particular form of fiscal stability. That's the reason for the IMF. So one shouldn't expect the IMF to have anything particularly. They're not interested in poverty. They're interested in governments being fiscally responsible so that the government debt gets repaid. That is their brief. So they do their job. We should not expect that when you hear what they say, you have to think about what their brief is. Where are they coming out of? They're not interested in, they'll be happy if poor people become rich, they're happy if, children's lives get better, but it's not their priority. So I think of it as being, they have a particular objective. Within that objective, they want, balanced budgets, because then the government debt is going to be, there will be no inflation, government debt will be priced to balance, and that's what they're interested in. You have to sort of take it as given that that's their job.
So as you said about the capacity building, so what mechanism do we need to cover up the dropout ratio in Bihar? Basically, if you see the dropout ratio, it creates an unemployment gap. So how to cover up them?
I guess I tried to say that. I think there is actually relatively simple answer there. I don't think that will solve all the problems. I think if there is a dearth of good teachers, I think it's the entire Indian education system at the secondary level is short of good teachers. But I think that many teachers who teach mathematics at class 8 can't do class 4 mathematics themselves. So I think there is, but I think that if you want to fix primary education, I think the answer is you have to kind of stop focusing on the syllabus. You cannot focus on syllabus. If that's your attitude, then it's not going to happen. I think it's very straightforward. You have to give up on the syllabus and focus on the child. What mechanisms do we need to? I think the government, in principle, the government could. Personally, I think we should get rid of the part of the Right to Education Act which says that the syllabus has to be completed. And I think beyond that, I think the government should say that till class 4, you don't have to teach history, you don't have to teach science. Many countries don't. Singapore doesn't spend a lot of time teaching science in class 4 or civics or history. They just teach you how to read and how to do mathematics. And maybe we should just focus on basic skills till class 4 or 5. And then we can teach. Children learn very fast once they have the basic skills.
Like doing this RCTs, to what level can we extrapolate these informations which we are getting from here? Like if we are doing a study here in Bihar and giving a solution out of those statistics that we are getting, then to what level can we extrapolate it? Because if we go to it to a if we generalize it too much, then it will become a myth that has been there in current world, existing in the world. Because there is a generalization. To what level we can do?
That's a perfectly good question. The answer is that's why we do. Everything I told you was based on many studies, and many studies we found very similar things. We do many studies in many places. There is never going to be a perfect answer to the question. There might be a country where it doesn't work, but I think we learn by doing multiple, 6 or 7. Many of the cases I studied, there are 6 or 7 different studies which found the same thing. That's part of the answer.
So, it's almost it's been 20 years after independence. Many government came and they went away. And the condition of our country in terms of poverty is still the same. More than 250 million people are still here. below the poverty line. You talked about the Smart Valley scheme that the government has not implemented. The government has no idea the amount which is being given is also insufficient. So why we lag behind and how? At one point we celebrate that we have surpassed France and become the sixth largest economy when we are soon going to surpass Britain also. But in one terms, we have less than 2,000 turnover per income per year. So how we will move ahead from and how we will become sufficient self-reliant country in terms of food, in terms of energy, in terms of overall development?
So I think those are many different questions, some of which I don't think are good objectives. I don't see why we want to be. I don't think we can be self-reliant in energy. We're not right now. We are one of the world's energy scarce countries, and I think one of the bad policies that I think we are pursuing right now is trying to use our energy source, which is coal, which happens to be the most polluting coal of all the major carbon sources. So I think we shouldn't try to be self-reliant on that. I think so. On the other hand, I don't think it's true that we have not achieved nothing. I mean, you basically look at the World Bank's current poverty rate is $1.90 per day at purchasing power parity. At that, our poverty has gone from 50% to 13% over the last 30 years. So I do think that things have got better. I think it's not. I don't think it's true that nothing's happened. I think what has happened is, in some ways, is maybe unsatisfactory. Maybe the environment has been damaged. Inequality has gone up a lot. But it's not that poverty has not gone down. Poverty has gone down a lot. We had, or if you take in 1990, our life expectancy at birth was something like 58 years. Now it's 68 years. Things have improved. I mean, we have to sort of assume that nothing happens in a day, especially economic change. So I don't think we're doing badly in some obvious sense. I think we're not doing anything like as well as we could do. That's different from saying we're doing badly.
Is seen as a multi-dimensional problem, but those who are working in that, they see it as a project or a program which is to be implemented in certain geographical areas. And those who are working in that are not, I can say, capacitated enough to see it as a multi-dimensional problem. They see it as an approach that, okay, I will be completing this particular project into this particular dimension and let us get out of it. What is your take on those who are going to join this development sector in next 1 year, or maybe 5 years down the line? How should they be used and be capacitated to see poverty elevation programs as a big, in a big dimension or in a big area?
So that's a very good question. I think that in all programs you have to assume that many people are just going to be implementing them. And for them, if there's a program, they are implementing it well. I don't know that we need to have everybody understand the deep philosophy behind everything. It's just probably not plausible that we'll succeed. I think it's important that you, who are here, you have been trained to be the leaders, you have an understanding of poverty, and that you bring to when you work in the field, you bring that sensibility to the design of the program. But it's going to be at the design stage that it matters a lot. Once the program has been kind of conceived, then of course you have to focus on the job at hand, which is to make sure that it's being implemented well. I think that I do think that you're raising a good question, which is how to have a kind of a deep enough perspective on the problem when you start out. That's very different from us expecting everybody to be able to think deeply about poverty. Maybe I'm less ambitious.
think the depth of your thought, Professor, is obvious from the ease with which you have been feeding the questions, the diverse volume of questions coming from the audience. Indeed, further development management institute for the participants of the institute, and I'm sure for all our invitees, it's been a great learning experience. Some of the myths you have shattered and the insights that you've given, I'm sure will empower our young graduating students to take forward your thoughts and learn to develop evidence-based approaches rather than just surface scratching as we discussed at the very outset. Before I invite Venerable Dean to give us a formal word of thanks, may I request a distinguished civil servant that we have with us, Mr. Sinha, to present a small memento as a token of our appreciation and regard to Professor Banerjee.
Faculty and the students. Since I had 35 years association with an institution which is more than government, and Professor Banerjee was very clear that this system, that is known as government, fails at places. It is very easy to announce a program, to launch a program, but he rightly quoted Barack Obama's healthcare program, that if that program is to be implemented, then for every component, a team of dedicated professionals are empowered and implied, and they have been given a time schedule. Now that he just quoted the example of the health sub-center, that if you want to upgrade the health system, the amount of money required to give physical infrastructure, the building and other equipments, the replacements, is so huge that it doesn't appear that government has taken into account all the components. So if you don't take into account the components required to make a program success, then program is bound to fail. Just a few days ago, I was going through a book, Why Nations Fail. And it says nations fail because systems fail. Nations fail because states fail. The states fail because systems fail. And I very much agree with Professor Banerjee. I had one example of polling. I was then in charge of a district. Also, the 2005 assembly elections were going on. At 10 in the night, it was winter season, a team of officials having some foreign members passed into my residential office. But it's so important that you look at here. So, who acted the program? And we said, sir, what is the problem? He said, sir, I don't have fund that I could arrange the transportation from Patna to Katia. So I said, if you plan a program, and if you know that on such and such date the vaccine is to be given, or the drug is to be given, then you have to ensure be it the manpower, the mobility, the cohesion, every component, whether it's in position or not. So I again end my observation. Thank you, Professor Banerjee, that you are very appreciate that government should not only be enthusiastic in launching the programs, it should be more particular in making it a rocket science procedure that for every step there is an answer if the system fails. Thank you so much, Professor Banerjee.
Before I start, thank you very much. I must tell you that the session was very enlightening. Sir, I as a teacher and a student of development took have to think about my own learning, what I had, and what my understanding of the development is. The one thing is clear that I again need to start thinking, all which continuously every teacher is that to start thinking the development person, the poverty person from a different perspective. Thank you for giving the different versions or different ways of looking on poverty. We are really impressed by your, whatever you give. We feel that we should have more time and we should have interacted with, longer, particularly the question answer series. But we certainly look forward that, the next time whenever you visit Bihar, and I'm happy that, the Bihar Jaipal is working in Bihar, so that I expect your visit will be a bit frequent. Never miss DMI whenever you are here in Bihar. So this is one. Thank you very much. I extend my heartfelt thanks to the entire JPL team which is here, and indirectly also say that whenever you have some experience sharing and a lot of work which is going on, if you come and share with our students, not only our students, our colleagues will be benefited by it, and it will be good for us to finally give it on back to our students also. So you're also welcome for always for the things over there. I'm grateful to all the guests who have come from outside, and the media people who had come from outside to cover this event over there. And I'm extremely thankful to my students who have asked some of the questions which were very valid, and this only shows your interest in the subject, and this only shows that you want to know and know more about it. So thank you very much. I thank all of my colleagues who has made it this possible for this event, and your teams, and which is a very short way to make this possible. So thank you everyone, both who have worked with us and those who have worked on the JPAL side. Thank you very much.